Hello and welcome to the lecture on absorption. Absorption is the process by which end products of digestion pass through the intestinal mucosa into the blood or lymph. For example, if a substance A is the end product of digestion, it is formed after breakdown of complex food particles. Now the transport of this substance A from the lumen of intestine into the blood vessels or lymph vessels is known as absorption. This can happen by different mechanisms. It can happen either by passive transport or active transport. Passive transport can be by simple diffusion or facilitated diffusion. Passive transport does not require energy. Active transport requires energy. Simple diffusion is a passive process and does not require energy. In simple diffusion, molecules move from high concentration to low concentration. Our cells have cell membrane. The cell membrane is made up of phospholipid bilayer. Substances which can cross this bilayer can be transported by simple diffusion. For example, gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide, small polar uncharged molecules like water and ethanol can be transported by simple diffusion. NCERT says small amount of monosaccharides, amino acids and some electrolytes are absorbed by simple diffusion, but practically charged molecules do not cross the cell membrane. Hence, electrolytes like sodium, potassium, chloride, even hydrogen ions do not cross the membrane by simple diffusion and require ion channels for diffusion. Also, glucose is a large molecule and does not readily cross the membrane by simple diffusion. So, we need to understand that small amounts of these substances can be transported by simple diffusion, but this is not the main mode of transport of glucose, amino acids and electrolytes. Facilitated diffusion is also a passive process and does not require energy. In facilitated diffusion also, molecules move from high concentration to low concentration. The difference between simple diffusion and facilitated diffusion is that in facilitated diffusion, there are carrier proteins which help in transport of specific molecules across the membrane. In the diagram, there is an example of carrier protein present in the membrane which helps transfer of substance A across the membrane from high concentration to low concentration. In the gastrointestinal tract, absorption of glucose, amino acids and many substances takes place by facilitated diffusion. This is a diagrammatic representation of transport of glucose by facilitated diffusion. Carrier protein is an integral protein. It has a domain which is outside the cell where glucose is attached. Once glucose attaches to it, it flips and releases the glucose inside the cell and then goes back to its original position. And this is how glucose is transported across the cell membrane with the help of a carrier protein. Transport of electrolytes like sodium, potassium, calcium, chloride and hydrogen ions by ion channels is also a type of facilitated diffusion. This diagram is a representation of an ion channel. Ion channels are present in the cell membrane and they remain closed. The ion channels open only for a short period of time in response to an appropriate stimulus. Ion channels are also specific for different ions which cross them. For example, there are different ion channels for calcium, potassium, chloride, etc. So, if ions are present in high concentration outside the cell, as soon as the channels open, they move from high concentration to low concentration, that is from outside of the cell to inside of the cell. Ions can also move from inside of the cell to outside of the cell depending on the concentration gradient. Active transport requires energy as it transports molecules against the concentration gradient. One example of active transport is sodium-potassium pump, also called as sodium-potassium ATPase. In the GIT, absorption of glucose, amino acids and other nutrients also takes place by active transport. Let's look at the sodium-potassium pump. This is a diagrammatic representation of a cell with sodium-potassium pump present in the cell membrane. It pumps 3 molecules of sodium out of the cell and 2 molecules of potassium inside the cell. Our cells are like bags of potassium. Majority of the potassium is present inside the cell, that is intracellularly, and very little potassium is present outside the cell, that is extracellularly. This pump moves potassium from outside to inside of the cell against the concentration gradient. And majority of sodium is present outside the cell, that is in the extracellular fluid, and very little sodium is present inside the cell. The sodium potassium ATPase pump moves sodium from inside to outside the cell, that is against the concentration gradient. To perform this function, it requires energy in the form of ATP. Another example of active transport is absorption of glucose by sodium glucose linked transporter, SGLT. In the intestinal lumen, this transporter takes 2 molecules of sodium and 1 molecule of glucose and transports them across the cell membrane. It takes sodium along the concentration gradient and glucose against the concentration gradient. Sodium is then again pumped out of the cell by sodium potassium pump, and glucose is absorbed into the bloodstream. Transport of water. Water can diffuse through the cell membrane by simple diffusion. It can also move across the cell membrane by special water channels called aquaporins. Movement of water depends on the osmotic gradient. In simple terms, you can say that water follows solutes. To understand this, let's look at 3 examples. These are 3 cells in 3 different types of fluids. Fluid present inside the cell is called as intracellular fluid, ICF, and fluid present outside the cell is called as extracellular fluid, ECF. In the first example, the ECF is hypotonic, that is, number of solutes outside the cell are less than the number of solutes inside the cell. So water will move from outside the cell to inside the cell to normalize the osmotic gradient. So to repeat again, water moves from a place where there are less solutes to a place where there are more solutes. In the next example, ECF is isotonic, that is, the number of solutes inside the cell and outside the cell is similar. In this case, there is no net movement of water in or out of the cell. And in the third example, ECF is hypertonic, that is, number of solutes outside the cell is more than the number of solutes inside the cell. Here water moves from inside to outside of the cell. Water moves from ICF to ECF. This principle is applicable to absorption of water in the GIT. When electrolytes and nutrients get absorbed, solutes in the mucosa of the intestine increases and solute in the lumen of the intestine decreases. This results in an osmotic gradient and water follows the solutes and gets absorbed. Absorption of fatty acids and glycerol. Fatty acids and glycerol are insoluble. They cannot be absorbed like other nutrients directly into the bloodstream. They are incorporated into small droplets called as micelles. That is, they are taken in small droplets called as micelles with the help of bile. Micelles are then absorbed in the intestinal mucosa. Inside the intestinal mucosal cells, they are reformed into fat globules which are coated with proteins called as chylomicrons. Chylomicrons are absorbed into the lymph vessels and lymph vessels eventually drain in the bloodstream. The absorbed substances are taken to different parts of the body as per their requirements, either to be used or stored for future use. This process is called as assimilation. Let's look at different sites of absorption in GIT. We have already seen that small intestine is the major organ for absorption of nutrients. Digestion is completed in duodenum, and jejunum and ileum are the major sites for absorption of nutrients. In the mouth, certain drugs, that is medicines, can be absorbed through the buccal mucosa. It is done by keeping the tablet under the tongue, that is sublingually. In the stomach, there is absorption of some amount of water, simple sugars and alcohol. And finally, in the large intestine, there is absorption of water and some amount of minerals. There are drugs available in the form of suppositories, which can be inserted into rectum and gets absorbed from the rectal mucosa. Now moving on to some disorders associated with gastrointestinal system. Inflammation of intestinal tract can be due to bacterial or viral infections. Intestinal tract can also be infected by parasites like tapeworm, roundworm, hookworm, etc. Jaundice is yellowish discoloration of skin and sclera. It is seen in conditions where liver is affected. There is deposition of bile pigments in the skin and sclera in jaundice. The diagram shows that the white sclera of eye appears yellow in jaundice. Vomiting is ejection of contents of stomach through the mouth. The center for vomit is present in the medulla. When this center gets activated, it sends signals to diaphragm and abdominal muscles to contract strongly, and it also relaxes the gastroesophageal sphincter. So the forceful contraction of diaphragm and abdominal muscles with relaxation of gastroesophageal sphincter results in reflux of contents of the stomach into the esophagus and then out of the mouth. Vomiting is preceded by an unpleasant sensation that you are going to vomit. That sensation or feeling is called as nausea. Diarrhea is abnormal increase in frequency of bowel movements. In our common language, we call it loose motions. Person suffering from diarrhea has increased frequency of bowel movements and watery fecal discharge. During diarrhea, there is reduced absorption of food. In constipation, there are decreased bowel movements and stools become difficult to pass, because of which feces are retained in colon for a longer period of time, and consistency of feces can become hard as well. Indigestion is the feeling of fullness when food is not properly digested. It can be due to inadequate enzyme secretion, anxiety, food poisoning, overeating, or eating spicy food. Protein energy malnutrition is a chronic condition due to inadequate intake of food. Not getting proper nutrition over a period of time gradually results in protein energy malnutrition. It is related to poverty, lack of access to hygienic, nutritious, and adequate food. It is widespread in underdeveloped countries. It is of two types, marasmus and kwashiorkor. In marasmus, there is deficiency of proteins and calories both. It is usually seen in infants less than 1 year of age, where mother's milk is replaced by food which is deficient in proteins and calories. Children suffering from marasmus have thin, frail bodies, that is, they are emaciated, they have dry, wrinkled skin, their physical and brain development both are affected. Kwashiorkor is produced by protein deficiency. It is seen in older children. These children get food which is adequate in calories but deficient in proteins. Like marasmus, there is muscle wasting and poor physical development and brain development. But unlike marasmus, in kwashiorkor some fat is left under the skin and also there is edema or swelling of body parts. To recap, this is an image of a child suffering from marasmus. You can see that the child has a thin, frail body. There is loss of muscle mass. You can see the ribs also, they are quite prominent. The child has thin hands and legs. The skin of the child is dry and wrinkled. And this is an image of a child suffering from kwashiorkor. He also has thin hands and legs, but there is some fat under the skin and there is swelling of the abdomen. So in marasmus, there is deficiency of proteins and calories, and in kwashiorkor, there is deficiency of proteins. Marasmus is common in infants younger than 1 year of age. Kwashiorkor is common in children between 6 months to 3 years of age. In marasmus, subcutaneous fat is not preserved. The skin is dry, wrinkled, and thin. In kwashiorkor, some amount of subcutaneous fat is preserved. In marasmus, edema is absent and edema or swelling is present in kwashiorkor. This brings us to the end of the video. In the next video, we will discuss few MCQs from the chapter. Thank you for your patient hearing.